We are the Power Platform duo who specialise in Microsoft Power Platform.
We did this talk at South Coast Summit and it got really good feedback, so we've decided to do an online version for all those people who missed the session. So, firstly, I am Charlie Phipps. I'm an MVP, BizApps MVP, and I'm a Power Platform architect and developer at Akari Solutions. I'm a PowerApps super user, so you'll see me do a lot of contributions in the PowerApps forums and mainly specialise in PowerApps. Then we have Alex Baker-Wong.
Hi, I'm Alex. I'm a cloud solution architect specialising in Power Platform, and I've got 10 plus years experience, probably closer to 15 now. So housekeeping, well, you can't talk to us right now, unfortunately, but yeah, if you have any questions, just leave them in the comments down below. So, why should we care? The disability minority is the only minority that you can join at any time. So have a think about that. So looking at a few statistics, 15% of the population is disabled, so that's 1 billion people. We then have 28% of the world who are visually impaired, right? But that includes someone like myself who wears glasses, because obviously 28% is higher than 15. 2% of the world's population have autism, 10% of the world's population have dyslexia, and 4% of the UK adult population has ADHD. So
Me.
we're looking, throughout this presentation we will actually look at, what can you do to help these people use these apps and be able to work in. So looking at vision loss, this is where you can't see the entire screen, right? Now generally you don't actually see a black blob, but it can blur out, and in certain cases go completely black. So it could either be that it takes out the center, so that tends to be with illnesses like glaucoma and so on, where the center actually starts to disintegrate within your eye, and so that blurs out. You can then have areas where you can only see in the middle, or it's splodges that you can't see on the screen. So, colour blindness. There's different types of colour blindness. The most common that people think about is no colour perception, so your grayscale, but that is actually quite unlikely, or quite rare. What you tend to see is then your red-green colour blindness or your blue-yellow colour blindness, where you can see in the original full colour the difference between red and orange in the red-green colour scale or the blue-yellow colour scale is very similar, right? And if your hue and saturation, saturation and brightness are adjusted, they will actually look the same. So, looking at this, looking at colour contrast using the text, if you look at the top left hand side, that is in the worst case scenario, and it's quite hard to read. If you then look at the top right hand side, that becomes a bit easier, and then the bottom it becomes even easier. That is then through use of colour and also making sure that the text size fits the purpose. If you're visually impaired, you can then zoom in, right, as one option. But if you don't set up the pages, then or to adapt for it to work, then it won't work. So I met someone recently who actually had a condition in her eyes and had an operation, but her vision changes on a day-to-day basis. And so she would have 5 pairs of glasses and would try them on each day to see which one worked for her. But the problem is if she goes into work and then forgets a pair of glasses, she then isn't able to see properly, and so therefore would then have to enlarge text. So, ADHD, dyslexia and autism. Charlie can't look at this page because it's a bit of mayhem. But it basically makes sort of standard web pages look even more complicated and just blaring, and so therefore we have to be very careful not to put too much on a page, right? You definitely don't want to be building the web page on the bottom right hand side. Just keep it simple. With mobility, so that's if you don't have use of your hands, then you would have to be able to use let's say a foot keyboard, or if you have, let's say, shakes due to Parkinson's or anything like that, you'd then have to use tabs because you can't use a mouse, because if you're shaking, your mouse cursor moves all over the place, right? And so it's taking that into consideration too. So, what can we do? we need to take accessibility into consideration right from the beginning, right? So when somebody puts a business case together, they need to include those people, right? To say we are including these disabilities to be able to access this audience, right? And therefore it can be taken up front and it can be included in that budget, right? If you get to the development testing phase, then your budget's already agreed a long time ago and it's very difficult to claw back that time. Then when it comes to requirements gathering, you've already identified who you're going to be targeting, and therefore you can build out those requirements within your DevOps board or your requirements document. That can then be built into design, developed out, and then also for testing, have specific test cases around those features, just to make sure that they're working. Over to you.
Perfect, thank you. So how can we build accessible apps? So the first thing we've actually done is work with Donna Sarker and her team. So what we wanted to do is actually work out what features are available in PowerApps that we as developers are not aware of. So there'll be many developers online now who are watching this and aren't actually aware of the standard features that are there ready to use. We've also worked with people in Donna's team, particularly Kelly Ford, to actually identify which of these features work well for their specific needs. So we're going to talk about those today. So if we look at the very first accessibility feature, it's called Live. So I'm not sure how many of you use Live or heard of Live, but as you can see from this image and my cursor, Live is a standard property built into the label control. So you have three properties that you can set for Live. You can either set it as off, which it is automatically done as default. You can change it to assertive, or you can change it to polite. So what does this mean? What does Live do? Well, Live is there for the screen readers. So the screen reader will be able to announce any change to that label. So at the moment, obviously, you can see we've got a label just called the Power Platform Duo. But if that content of the label was to change, because I don't have a visual impairment, I'd be able to see that. But if I had a visual impairment, how would I know that that's changed? Well, my screen reader would tell me via the Live command. So polite allows the screen reader to announce everything on the screen first, and then it will make the announcement that the text on the label have changed. Whereas assertive will actually interrupt the screen reader. So if the screen reader is announcing all the properties, etc., that you see on the screen, and then a label suddenly changes content, it will actually interrupt and then continue to announce the other elements on the screen. So Live is a really cool feature. You can also use Notify as well, which we'll come on to later. Another accessibility feature is Role. So again, this is only applicable to the label control, but Role actually tells the user the intended purpose. So visually I can see when something's a heading. You can see when something's maybe a subheading, or we can see when something is default text. But if I've got this in visual impairment, I can't see that, and I should be made aware of it. So it's allowing a screen reader user to know whether a label is actually a heading. It also allows them to navigate quicker through the app, through your standard navigation as you normally would. Very much like a Word document, you would have your headings, your subheadings, and that would lead into your content page where you can click through. It's allowing the screen reader to actually use the application, which makes it much more accessible for those in particular with visual impairments. Now, Alex briefly mentioned this, but tab index. So we have tab index, which is a property up on the top left hand side, as you can see. So for example, I've added this tab index to a input control, just a standard input control. Now there's two types of properties you can set on a tab index, either 0 or -1. So 0 means the control participates in keyboard navigation, and -1 means it doesn't. So why do I care? So I should have my application to be able to be used by keyboard navigation, because as Alex mentioned, you may have a user who uses keyboard via their foot. You may have tab index users. People with Parkinson's can't necessarily use a mouse. It's too unstable to use a mouse, and actually they find it easier just touching the tab and tabbing through the application. So this is why you should allow tab index and make your properties work with tab indexing. Now, one thing to note here is the tab index order. The navigation order goes from left to right, then top to bottom, in like a Z pattern. So left to right, top to bottom. The order is based on the X and the Y properties values of the control. So it's not based on your tree view. So on the left hand side you can obviously see we've got a tree view. It's important for developers to know that tree view is just maybe when you've added the property or if you've aligned the property to bring it to front. But that is not what controls the navigation order. Videos in PowerApps, you can make videos much more accessible. Now there's two things I recommend doing when you add a video into PowerApps. The first thing is using what we call closed caption URL. You might just be able to see it there, but it's called closed caption URL, which is a property that allows you to add your recordings, your audio recordings. So you can add closed captions in a special format called WebVTT format to your closed captions URL. The other thing I recommend is adding a description to the accessibility label property to actually describe the video content. You know, for me, when I personally look at a video, I can probably tell from the thumbnail what the video is going to include. But if I've got a visual impairment, how do I know what the video is going to include? That's why we use the accessible label. Now, one of my favourite features recently announced was the Creator Kit. So I don't know how many of you online have actually downloaded and used the Creator Kit. If you haven't, I highly recommend it. It will be in our link in the video on how to deploy the Creator Kit, and we'll add that in the links below. But the Creator Kit helps you for many reasons. Firstly, it does have all your standard controls in Fluent UI, and it has best practices. It has the do's and the don'ts. So actually, when you're building applications, it gives you that sort of best practice and making sure you build consistent applications for your clients. But the one thing I really like is the theme designer, they call it. So what you can see, I know these screenshots are quite small, so I'm going to use my cursor to explain. On the top left hand side, what I can actually do is put in a primary colour, a text colour and a background colour of my choice. Now this will actually tell me whether this is accessible. So it has an accessibility checker and it will come up with a notification saying this is actually accessible, this is good colour scheme. And then on the top right hand side there's a button where I'm able to export my colour theme. If it's a bad colour scheme, which you can see from here, this is unreadable even if you could read it, it will come up with an error message and it will come up with recommendations and it will come up with reasons why this is not accessible. So now you can start building accessible apps with good colour themes, and then you can export these and import these directly into your applications. I highly recommend using this tool and having a look at what else the Creator Kit can offer you. Logic control order. So I briefly touched upon this, but I'm going to show you in an example. So the screen readers, users, can navigate content sequentially. So what does this mean? I said that the order of the navigation is determined by the position of the controls. So it's starting from the left, starting from the top to the bottom, then left to right. So the size of the control actually doesn't matter. It's all based on the X and the Y properties. So it doesn't matter how big the control is or where the control sits in your tree view. It literally matters on the X and the Y property values. So in this bottom image, what you can see, in this example, A appears first in the sequence because it's closest to the top. Then B, because it goes the next height up, but then left to right. So B, then C, and then D is the furthest from the top, so it appears last. So if I was a screen reader, or what I would be announcing is the property A, B, C, and D. So this is important to consider when designing your applications and when building out your applications. Alex already mentioned today that if you're not thinking about accessibility at design, you're doing something wrong, and I totally agree. And this helps you understand why that is so important. You've got to start thinking outside the box, and you've got to start putting yourself in the shoes of a screen reader, right? You would agree with that, Alex. So, you know, this is why it's important to actually consider it even at the wireframing state and requirements gathering. So asking your clients what accessibility features they would like, what users they would like this to reach out to. Personally, when I build applications, I try and reach out to all users, make it as inclusive as possible. So just be aware of the logical control order, especially when designing your applications. Now what you can do is actually group controls. Now the default order is isolated content, but not grouped. So what that means is, as you can see from this tree view, at the moment all of these elements are ungrouped. So I have a border, I have a title, I have a control A, control B, control C, control D, another border and a header. So how would this actually be announced by a screen reader? Well, what it would do, it would announce this left rectangle that I'm highlighting here in my cursor. It would then show the right rectangle. Then it would announce the left heading, then the right heading, then A, then C, then B, then D. Well, actually, that's no good to me because I can see that these should probably be announced together because I've tried to put them in what they call a component. So the recommendation is to use containers to group related content. So now what you can see is I've got a left container and I've got a right container, and I've put all my controls within that left container on the left hand side. So now these are all grouped. So not only does that look better and it makes your applications more maintainable for the future for other developers or other iterations when you come to develop your applications, but actually it makes it much better for the screen reader. Now the control order is logical. So what screen reader users would now get is left container, so the rectangle, the left heading, then A, then B. Then it would move on to announce the right rectangle, the right heading, C and D, which makes much more sense for someone who's not visually impaired. We can see that, we know that. But someone who has that visual impairment would not know that. So that's what we need to start considering when actually developing out these applications, thinking about using containers to group your content. All these slides, I know some of this text is small, so all these slides will be attached in a link below, so you'll have access to all these after. Now, obviously I've been talking about some really cool features that we have got, but we both know that there are some accessibility limitations still in PowerApps. And, these limitations are decreasing because the PowerApps team and the usability and accessibility teams are working very hard on this. But some of the things that we've noticed, talking with Kelly Ford and some of other Donna's team, is there are a few controls and a few elements that people like to build in their applications which aren't accessible. So you need to be aware of this when building these. First is dialogues and overlays. Dialogues and user interfaces that appear on top of another are not supported. Okay, they're not announced. So I can visually see that I've got this overlay. I might have this form on this overlay or a notification or something. But if I have a visual impairment, I'm not seeing that. And there's no accessibility feature built in for overlays at the moment. Doesn't mean there won't be, but at the moment there isn't. Custom tables is another, right? So the only built-in control that supports two-dimensional data is data tables. But I think they're still in preview, aren't they, Alex? So obviously we have a bit of an issue ourselves as developers with data tables. And we do sometimes, hands up, use galleries, don't we? Now, well, yes, you say sometimes. It's a bad habit, alright, of ours. And we learnt a few things while researching this, okay? But you need to avoid using galleries if you want to make your apps accessible, because you need to avoid galleries to present data in rows and columns. Rows and columns must be annotated so that a screen reader user can understand their structure and navigate cells. This can't easily be achieved through a gallery, so it might be worth using data tables or even a custom component. But yeah, we held our hands up. We do have this bad habit of building them, and a lot of people do, right? Because galleries look much nicer for someone who's not visually impaired, but we have to make our apps inclusive, and that's what we're honing in today. The next is scrollable content. Keyboard users can't scroll forms and scrollable screens and containers if there's no interactive controls. So making the tab index in your gallery. So for example, if you've got a gallery or a scrollable form, how do I navigate to the bottom if I'm using a tab? Well, I include tab index so it appears, so as I tab it scrolls. If I don't have tab index on any of the if I don't have tab index on any of the controls underneath where it is scrollable, my keyboard user is not able to scroll. So this is something you need to consider both at design and development stage. One of my favourite features, I know this is your favourite feature, Alex, it's one of my favourite features, but is the accessibility checker. But just the app checker in general, right? So the accessibility checker is in the top right hand side of your PowerApps. So there's this sort of, I call it the doctor icon, which I know you laugh at. But there's this
Stethoscope.
That's the one. Yeah, I can never pronounce that, so I just say doctor icon, right? But you will get notifications on performance issues, formula errors, but also there's accessibility errors. So as you can see from here, I've got 5 issues with regards to accessibility. If I look at this, I can see that I've got 2 accessibility errors, 1 warning, and 2 tips. So accessibility checker is built into split into 3 priorities: errors, warnings, and tips. So here, for example, I can see that my video is missing captions. So it says that I've got no closed caption URL, and that's my warning. I can see that I've got 2 tips. I should change my screen name. What this means is you should make your screen names meaningful. So if I'm visually impaired, I should know from the screen reader that I'm on the home screen because it's announced it's a home screen. Or, you know, if I'm on a form screen, then it's telling me what the form screen is or what the particular screen is. So the point here is give it a meaningful name. What I love about this though is if you click on something, for example, this error, as you can see I've highlighted, it says focus isn't showing. Okay, focus border thickness. It will actually tell me how to fix it and also why to fix it. So if you are ignoring these accessibility recommendations and issues, then you have a problem because you're not building inclusive apps. Please take a look at this accessibility checker before deploying to production. It's very useful. It tells you how to fix it, it tells you why to fix it, and basically you'll be able to reach more users with your applications, and that's only a good thing. So, what have we learned? We have said that we've worked with Donna Sarker and her team. We firstly like to thank Donna for opening up those connections and working with us. It's been an absolute fantastic journey, and it's something we will continue. We are really enthusiastic about accessibility and inclusion. It's at the heart of our company. It's at the heart of us. You know, we both have our own disabilities to deal with. We know a lot of people who have disabilities, and we want to make these applications more inclusive. So working with some of the users who have more severe disabilities, we've understood that using Notify is actually better for screen readers than the live. So early on we mentioned live is a property that you can turn on, for example, for labels. Well, actually start using the Notify function even on buttons. Whenever an action takes place or content changes in the application itself, use the Notify to announce to the end user that something has changed. The reason for this, it lasts longer than your standard live caption. Default it lasts for 10 seconds, but you can also change how long the Notify stays for. And those who aren't visually impaired, you can also change it. So, you know, you can have a warning, you can have a success, you can have an error notification, you can even just have an information notification, which gives nice colours. So you start using the Notify and use it a lot. Use it whenever there's an action taken, or whenever some content's changed, or whenever you need to announce something, particularly to a screen reader. We mentioned using meaningful screen names. Use that. Biggest thing, avoid complexity. Make your app simple to use. Right? Think of the sort of 3-click rule. You want to make your applications easy. If your page is too busy, people with ADHD, dyslexia, other sort of disabilities like that are going to struggle to use it because they're overwhelmed. There's too much information to take in. I know that from my background, and just don't overcomplicate them. You can make beautiful looking applications that don't need to be too complex. Include accessibility in your test cases. Alex, you mentioned that, but we need to start testing against accessibility. We need to understand all the different disabilities of those that will be using our application and start testing for them. And then we also need to think about connecting with an accessibility expert. So we got recommended this, and you'll find the link there. But there is a disability answer desk there as a support resource for organisations that have questions about accessibility within Microsoft products. So please feel free to go to that link and reach out. Alex, over to you.
Yeah, so for all of our applications that we build we build in colour schemes. So we've got default, dark mode and high contrast, and that will allow for users to be able to switch colours, right? Because dark mode they find is less invasive on people who's looking at the screen, and then high contrast is for making it a lot easier to read, as we saw on one of the previous slides. And so what we do is we put the entire colour scheme into a JSON object, and then based on your theme that you select, you then switch out those JSON objects. And then for each item within there, you then go look up on the JSON object what colour you need. Right, and that's a nice easy way of just switching out colours. A big one is then creating responsive layouts. So this comes back to the text size, right? If you increase the text size, the boxes need to increase in size. This also comes to when you use different screen sizes, right? Your text size will then, or your boxes will then adjust to it. So for key takeaways, take accessibility and inclusion into account from the beginning. So look at your business case, make sure you include those disabilities so you can hit those audiences. Just because you cannot see a disability doesn't mean it isn't there, right? So take that into account, right? You may not see that your co-worker has it, but if you're building an application for 1,000 people, you're not going to know all those 1,000 people. Try out the different features, right? Take a screen reader, try it on your application, try tabbing through your app, see if you can actually get through it, right? That makes it's actually a fun little exercise that you can do, and yeah, it's great fun actually. So for key design elements, there's a few of them. Don't make text styles too small. Rule of thumb is don't do anything less than 12 pixels, right? And then from your heading 4 to 1, just increase from there. Color pickers, I mean, Charlie mentioned the Creator Kit, right? You can use that. Adobe Color has one as well. There's a number of them online. Just find one that you like and use that. A quick tip is, for a shortcut, your company has already got marketing colors. You can use those. Those should have gone through an accessibility checker anyway. And so it's a nice easy way of bypassing all of that work. Oh, well, not that much work, but still. Keep the pages simple, right? You're not trying to win a design award, keep it simple. There's been found that places like Amazon for their shopping, other online shopping places, they have done they've built in their accessibility features and then have found that people have bought more across all areas, not just for disabled users. Just because the pages are simpler, easier to use, quicker to use. User navigation follows the way people read, right? Left to right, top to bottom. And so screen readers follow that process. So make sure that your designs follow that. Ensure the accessibility features are completed. So your accessibility labels, your tab index, and the various other features that Charlie has mentioned. The accessibility checker does help out a fair bit with that. However, knowing whether it should have a tab index on it or not is up to you. It's not necessarily up to. It's very difficult to programmatically create. Then ensure embedded content is accessible, right? If the content in your app is not accessible, then your whole app is not accessible, right? Microsoft did have an accessibility stand. Unfortunately, can't go there anymore. But Donna Sarker has actually created a web page for you to go and have a look. It was specifically created for the South Coast Summit for us, so definitely go have a look, read through that. It's a good read. And yeah, come follow us. We'll be creating a lot more content on accessibility and on PowerApps as well.
Yeah, I'd just say it's been great working with Donna and her team. We'll continue to work with her and the experts So do follow us. We've got some up and coming features and stuff that we're going to release to help you see accessible and inclusive apps in person. We will be attending a lot more talks, conferences, so look out, stay tuned, and we will be excited to present for you soon.
Please like, subscribe and click on the bell icon. Let us know in the comments below what you'd like to see in the future.